Good morning. I'd like to call this work session of the Southampton Town Board to order on this first day of October 2020. Please rise and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please be seated. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Supervisor Schneiderman.
Here.
Councilman Lofstad.
Here.
Councilman Martell.
Here.
Councilman Bouvier.
Here.
Councilman Scivone.
Present.
All right, excellent. All right, so our first item on the agenda has to do with agricultural plan development districts. And Kathleen Murray is here. When we did the PDD repeal a couple of years ago, it was sweeping in nature, and it encompassed all PDDs, including agricultural PDDs, which really were very different. I'm not even sure why they're called PDDs, but they were under that section of code, and so they've disappeared from the code, and there, I guess, is some desire on the part of some of our agricultural community to see it reinstated. So Kathleen will, I think, introduce what they are, and we'll be able to discuss this a little bit, whether it's the direction we want to go.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Supervisor. Good morning, members of the Town Board. On July 11, 2017, by local law number 616 of 2017, the Town Board, following a moratorium and after careful review and consideration, eliminated the availability of the Planned Development District as a zoning tool within this town. While the repeal was largely focused on the unpredictability PDD applications introduced into a community, it inadvertently failed to address or exempt agricultural PDDs from the legislation. As a right-to-farm community, the purpose of the law that was proposed before you in draft form is to examine whether or not you want to reinstate that Ag PDD as a tool within the town. Some of the goals and purposes that are stated in the current legislation, which is 330-248G for an Ag PDD, includes encouraging and protecting farming and the business of farming within the town, recognizing agriculture as a vital local economic base that provides the town with much of its rural, rustic, and scenic value and beauty, providing the farmer with another mechanism in which to access equity in the land by providing development rights that can be immediately transferred or extinguished to facilitate farmland preservation, and facilitating farming for a minimum of 10 years and reducing suburban sprawl. By way of background, the town first authorized the use of the Ag PDD by local law number 43 of 2001. Since that time, the town, together with landowner farmers, enacted 6 Ag PDDs that are currently within your town code. Because none of the above stated goals have arguably changed, the proposition here is to determine whether or not you want to reinstate those Ag PDDs. I will note that the 2016 PDD moratorium did specifically exclude Ag PDDs from that moratorium. But the resultant legislation that came out of that moratorium did not address Ag PDDs specifically, and so they have been removed from your code as a tool.
So just to be clear, it's not in the moratorium.
It was not in the moratorium.
It was not included in the moratorium.
Correct. It was not in the moratorium, and also just by way of further explanation, when we did the mandatory referendum to require a supermajority vote for PDD approvals, Ag PDDs were excluded from that mandatory referendum. So if you did reinstate the tool, the Ag PDD as a tool, it would be subject to simple majority vote. It was not subject to that supermajority vote. As it relates to the specifics of the Ag PDD and how that works, we do have Janice Scher and David Wilcox here from your planning department, if you would like to discuss that with them. And also a representative from the farming community, Lee Foster, has joined us here today.
Kathleen, the PDDs in general, they were basically rezonings. We were giving a use not contemplated under zoning with this idea that somehow that use had some community benefits, and it was, or maybe there'd be a package of community benefits that were completely unrelated to the use that were involved in those PDDs. the ag PDDs don't contemplate any change in zoning. In other words, if it's residential, it stays residential. All it seems to do is preserve a yield, and it creates some, I'm not even clear on whether it's a requirement for the town to make an offer of development rights purchase based on that yield or not. It's a little bit confusing to me in the language, whether it's we have to make that requirement. I have to, first of all, I think that probably should have never been called PDD. This is really not a PDD. This is something that was designed, I think, I'm going to guess, and maybe Lee has more of the historical context, Lee Foster, but there probably was a time when there was a large rezoning that was being proposed, an upzoning, and farmers were concerned that they were going to lose tremendous amount of value because instead of being able to build, let's say, 30 houses, they would only be able to build 15. Interestingly enough, I'm not even sure that devalued the property, that rezoning, because the estate lots seem to be extremely valuable. But either way, the farmers at the time probably speculated that they were going to lose a lot of value, and I better come and get my subdivision in now before the town upzones, otherwise I'm going to lose value. And so in an effort to keep the farmers farming and not subdivide their land and sell it for development, this tool was created. It makes a lot of sense. So, we're going to preserve your density. You're going to keep this density that you currently have. And, when you're ready to sell your development rights, we'll buy them at the current level of density. Right now, there's no upzonings proposed, but my guess, and you may know the historical context, is that probably grew out of a time like that.
I believe that's the case. I would defer to actually Lee Foster because she was probably the only one that lived it. But I do, as I understand it, it was an effort to preserve yield in order to avoid upzones that
So-
would arguably devalue farmland.
And now,
And to preserve the farming as a.
So if we were to reinstate it, is that the yield table that's in this law the same as the current yield, or is it a higher yield based on an older zoning?
I'll defer to Dave on that, your director of planning, but I believe it's the same.
Well, while you're answering that, Dave, the other PDDs, the 5 other ag PDDs that are still in our arsenal, have we reviewed those? We got a little bit of a surprise when we did repealed the PDD law on some other PDDs, and I don't want to repeat that. So I just want to be assured that there's no special conditions that are set on those properties, on those 5 other PDDs, so that whatever we do right now is consistently applied or fairly applied to all those properties.
It's sort of related to John's concern, and this really gets to Kathleen when I was asking before about whether we're required to make an offer, because we're required certainly to appraise. The town board's aware that in some areas, the land has got, not that it's not an excellent land for acquisition for open space, but the prices have become so high in some of these areas that we just can't do it. We don't have enough CPF funds, or it would exhaust the entire fund, and we have to sometimes make decisions about how to spend those funds. And we want to keep farmers farming, but sometimes the value of these lots, an oceanfront farm, can be beyond our ability, waterfront farms, and we want to help the best we can, but within our means. And I'm a little bit concerned that we may get backed in an effort to want to do the right thing through an easement to keep somebody farming. We may tie some future board's hand where now they're forced to acquire land that may be outside of our abilities. Do you understand
Absolutely.
what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, okay.
Let me just address the first question about the zoning. The
Thanks
zoning,
for finishing my because that's where we're going. And then the second part of that was that I also wanted to try to understand, if this PDD does not require a supermajority, why is it a PDD? And perhaps if we're in this, we ought to change this
Change the name.
designation so it doesn't have this confusion that I'm sure we're going to get with
Yeah, I would
opponents.
certainly want to rename it.
Yeah, yeah,
Just to avoid public confusion that
yep,
it's
exactly.
another giveaway somehow of zoning.
And also the supermajority vote requirement.
Right.
Correct?
Yeah, it
I
never
would-
had it.
It never had that. I would not put the supermajority
Yeah.
vote back in.
No, no.
Well, you can't require a supermajority.
I don't want to create a new PDD.
Without a public vote, right? Because you can't restrict your own powers without the public allowing you to restrict your own powers. So if we wanted to make whatever this thing is by supermajority only, we have to put it on the ballot. So,
Well, in addition to that, and everything that we're discussing here, we're looking at a public hearing in November. This is going to go before the Agricultural Advisory Committee as well, and they'll give us their thoughts. on
right.
this.
If we do something,
Sure,
li-
they're-
if we do something like this, those would be my concern would be, I don't want to I don't want to force the town to acquire. I think we have to make that clear that we're not obligated to acquire, even if we are obligated to enter into negotiations. And I do think if we're going to do this, we ought to rename it. Come up with a different name to not confuse the public. You know, we did away with PDDs. This doesn't need to be called a PDD in any way. This could be a farming incentive or something. We'll come up with a better name. But Dave, go ahead.
Yeah, so the zoning table that is in the code, those zoning yields and open space requirements are exactly what's in the code today that the planning board follows. So if someone came in with a subdivision and it was not under Ag PDD and it met the certain area requirements and zoning requirements, these are the open space area standards that the planning board would apply. The Ag PDD, in my understanding, just froze these requirements in time, so that if there was an upzoning, the farmer who put an Ag PDD on the property and put the easement on the property would get the same zoning yield and the same open space requirements that they would get prior to the upzoning. There haven't been any upzoning since this code went into effect, and as a result, these requirements in the code are exactly what is still in the code today for the planning board. Relative to the
But
mandate.
it does protect the farmer against the possibility of an upzoning,
Absolutely.
even though we're not thinking about upzoning
Absolutely.
anything. In fact, with all of these IA systems, there's less pressure. A lot of those large lot zonings were to protect drinking water, right? Based on the 208 study, and now we have IA systems that can remove nitrogen. So and there's also a lot of pressure, I think, to create affordable housing. So, which doesn't come out of upzoning. It comes, sometimes you have to, where one house could go, you might have to have it be two homes or something to make it affordable, or accessory apartments and things like that. So, I don't see in the next few years any upzonings occurring, but, there could be different people sitting in these seats who have different intentions, so.
Yeah, and I just to add on to that, the idea here was to protect the farmer and the availability of that land to farm. And I just want to be really careful that we don't do anything going into the future that affects that.
Well, and also, like, right now we have a process. A farmer comes to us and says, I want to sell some development rights. We appraise them and we acquire them. I'm concerned that in granting the easement, that we're bound to buy them. Where right now we have discretion, and I'm not clear in reading that law whether we're bound to purchase them or not. And that would be sort of tying our hands a little bit. And, we've worked with a lot of farmers. Sometimes farmers have sold development rights for a little bit less than fair market value. And we said, okay, we'll do it. But sometimes we just can't reach agreements on the value. And we've done, as you know, a number of enhanced easements too, where additional restrictions are put on the farm in an effort to provide additional value to the farmer for traditional farming. We have that tool now that we didn't have back then. Okay, sorry, Dave.
Well, you basically said what I wanted to say. I mean, the code, I'll read from the code. It says, if the town wishes to purchase development rights or fee title on all or part of the parcel, the town shall make an offer.
Right,
There's
so that
another
does not
section.
preclude us from
Right.
offering a specific amount for those development rights on the farm. We could still negotiate with the farmer, and it's probably going to be a big number, you know.
Right, and the way I read it, if you can't
they're happy
reach an
with it,
agreement, then you don't reach an
There's
agreement.
another section.
Right,
though,
and
that-
if the
Well,
landowner-
yeah, when-
Excuse me, if the landowner's happy with that offer, they can still accept it, even if it's their land and their development right.
Correct.
Okay.
The conflicting impression may come from the actual the Ag PDD sections in the code, not the code itself, but this is, I'm not going to indicate which Ag PDD this is, because I think it's the same throughout all of them, but it says that during the term of the easement, if the landowner requests, the town shall be obligated to offer.
That's,
So
that's the
Yes.
section.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
during the term of the easement, if the landowner so requests, the town shall be obligated to offer to purchase one or more of such development credits or the fee title to the property at fair market value as more particularly set forth in the easement.
That's the section I'm concerned about.
Right.
Okay.
So I think we need some,
So suddenly, a property that we may or may not have otherwise acquired to, because we've given an easement now, Ag PDD rather, which is in essence an easement.
We're obligated.
We're obligated now to at least acquire one of the lots, which we might not have otherwise acquired.
They don't develop it for 10 years, right? There's a time frame.
That's within the 10 years.
yeah, within the 10 years, but no less than 5 years.
Right.
After 5 years passes, they can ask for termination of the easement and negotiate sale of some development rights.
Yeah.
Seems
So-
arbitrary.
What is the advantage to the farmer to have this in place?
Well-
If a farmer was offered something by the town and it didn't meet the standards of the development rights or the cost or the market value, and they were happy with the number that they got, they could not, under this law, accept the lower number.
Okay?
Is that correct?
Yeah, they wouldn't have to.
You're saying they could
Not-
not,
yeah.
even if they wanted to?
Can you repeat
or-
that? I'm confused as the
Okay,
question.
I'm
to-
sorry. What's the advantage of this law to our farmers?
Lee, do you want to?
Lee, do you want to try to
Lee,
answer?
maybe you.
Since the inception of.
Lee, I'm
need to
sorry, I'm
come
gonna
up,
have to bring you
sorry.
over here, because we can hear you fine. No, you don't have to use that, as long as you're 6 feet away, the governor will allow you to. But we can hear you when you sit there, but we're recording and we won't be able
I
to.
understand.
But thank you, Lee, for coming out.
No, it's okay. I'm not sure that I can clarify all your questions, but this one I can. The advantage really is to allow the farm family to plan for the future. And the instruments of the government that would relate to upzoning was a crisis for us.
Right.
And so having this in place, and I think modified and worked over for many, many months before it was actually adopted, reflects the amount of concerted effort on the part of the farmer to make it fair. And so these back and forths, even within the documents, I think relate to the liberty of negotiation. Quite obviously, if you can't come to terms, the farmer's going to move out of the easement and subdivide property. And that's, of course, not what we want to have happen. So a lot of these engagements really reflect, I think, the farmers that intend to continue and the legacy then continue on so that there's this sense of place here that will be preserved. And I think the Ag PDs at this point taken, if you look at the various ones that have been adopted, the land is still there and not much has changed. So it was a real fixture. And I think it gave the farm families at that point a real sense of the dynamic interest in the town for preserving farms. And what more can I
Yeah,
say?
it seems like there's a need for something in the code, particularly with the high values of these farmland properties, that we want to keep the farmers farming, and we might not at this moment be in a position to acquire development rights. I can see why the farmer would want to preserve the amount of development rights for some future sale without feeling forced to start putting houses on the farmland. I'm not sure that this law is perfect, because it does tie the hands in some ways. Maybe we could work together to try to create a mechanism that does protect both the farmer's interests and the town's interests. We're not planning any upzonings whatsoever, but I could see, I could see farmers concerned about protecting the current value and not, wanting to have to subdivide.
Well, I'd be interested to know what it is that has brought this to the table. Is there interest that now, because of it seems as though it dropped through reestablish it? Because when I saw that document that reflected, it was sent to the farmland owners when the review was done, in 17, was that?
I was assuming the farmers were coming to us asking to reinstate it. Is that not the case?
Yeah, that's true. That is right.
The farmer?
Oh, okay, so there's interest in having
If
this,
someone wants to enact an ag PDD on their parcel, it's not available because it went away as a wholesale, part of the PDD law. So it's not available anymore.
just
question
because,
is whether or
just
not-
because it was
It was
not
stricken from the
noted,
code.
okay, so this is sort of a semantic problem here that's trying to be
Well, but
corrected.
and I think to your point, if there's someone that has a new tract of land and then wants to put on the conditions of what we're
Right.
calling an ag easement, I think it's a terrible.
Is there some benefit I'm missing? Is there like an estate planning or some kind of tax benefit issue that I'm not seeing in this? Because there's no threat of upzoning right now. So why would somebody want this? Janice, maybe I could have you come up.
Sure.
Thank you, Lee.
I feel like thank you, Lee. I feel like I'm missing something here.
Good morning. It's actually a confusing code, and I agree with you that it doesn't belong as a PDD, because a PDD was an incentive zoning tool. So planned development districts are an incentive zoning tool that you had in the code for many years, but this is not an incentive zone. Meaning incentive zoning is when the developer can do something for the town that the town couldn't otherwise do. So you grant them some kind of density in exchange for a community benefit. This ag PDD thing never belonged there. So this is a great time to think about where else it belongs, and then maybe the development rights section, TDR section of the code that's compatible with CPF. I think it was addressing your issue, Jay, of buying down credits over time, over a 10-year period. So the town wasn't faced with, buy my land or I'm subdividing it, and if you don't buy it right now for $20 million, whatever, then I'm building. And so it was a tool for the town also, that you could buy the development rights over a prescribed period of time. So that was the benefit. In some ways, you were buying time, right? You were buying the opportunity no one's going to develop for 10 years, that farm. And in that 10 years, they had locked their density yield under the current zoning, so that no worries about upzoning. And then they were able to negotiate the purchases of the development rights over time.
They sell parts.
But nothing locked the town's price in. So
No,
in other
because-
words, so the farmer got protected in terms of density, but the town didn't say you have the right to purchase at this price now, not at the price 10 years from now, because that could go up 50%, 100%. There was no like,
Conversely, if it goes down.
That is right.
there was nothing.
It's always fair market at the
It was
time of the
always
purchase.
fair market.
Yes.
So the farmer was protected in terms of the density, but the town wasn't protected at the moment that easement.
Right. We were
in terms of
protected
price.
in as much as we weren't going to get a subdivision of, housing.
Right.
That was our protection. That was our end of the bargain, was we didn't want to see these farmlands be developed, and the farmer didn't want to see them be upzoned. And so it was like kind of a meeting in the middle, and it bought time for everyone to be able to plan and be able to, buy the development rights, however many were established.
Right.
Based on that yield, under that little chart in the code.
But the farmer
And-
was never obligated to sell. in this either.
No.
Farmer
So that's
always
why
has
we used
the
to say you're
option,
buying time,
except
because
that
you
we're
really were
obligated
to some
buy
degree.
one, it sounds like.
And I think
I think
initially there was some consideration there. When you enter into the easement, you were paid. Isn't that so?
I don't think so.
When you enter into there was never an initial development right purchase at all? Oh, okay,
And
so
the
now,
town doesn't have what I would call an option here. We don't
Right.
have an option to acquire, because they have the right to say no. So I'm not sure, I think that we need to sort of, I want to do whatever we can to protect farmers.
right.
As an industry, I think it's really important to our economy and our agrarian history, part of our rural way of life out here.
And food safety.
Food, well, and there's lots of.
And
pieces.
soil, Primac soils, I mean, that's another
Right,
huge, the
sustainability.
sustainability and the
So,
soils.
I just think we need to set up, I don't think this piece of code in its current form should be reinstated right now.
Okay.
Because it doesn't, I'm not sure what it does for the farmers, and I'm not sure what it does for the town. I think we should set up a working group of, like, you and maybe Kathleen and maybe Lee and,
And Dave, who's
And
development
Dave,
rights manager here, so
and
that would
maybe
be,
Tommy John,
Yeah.
you're the liaison, aren't you? And
And I'd like
let's,
to get the Agricultural Advisory Committee involved in this.
maybe
Right.
John Halsey,
That can-
if there's something out there that makes sense,
Enhanced easement.
I like the idea of, if there is a pending upzoning, to protect the value of that farmland. I don't want the farmer's value diminished by an act of zoning. I don't really want anybody's value. I don't want the open space property owners to say, oh, I gotta cut up the woodlands now and subdivide because the town's gonna take away all these rights. I think we can look at a tool that sort of preserves, open space.
so a farmer right now wanted to come in and get an ag easement for their property under the provisions of this code, which is no longer available. The real question is whether or not he wants to sell his development rights to the town over time, right?
And we have
And
tools
if we
now.
want to do that, then how do we do that? And what's our mechanism?
We
And
have
where can we fit that in the
installment sales
code?
and things like that. We
Right.
could, we'd have to bring Lisa into the conversation, but we could agree to acquire the development rights over whatever, a 4-year period or 10-year period, or,
Right,
you know,
and that's what that ag easement
but
does.
we'd be locking in the price today. It wouldn't be based on fair market, it would be based on today's price, valuation, and we're gonna buy it.
Well, I think that's the
There could be
problem.
escalators
you know.
for CPI
Yeah, I think you
and
gotta
things
do
like that.
things
But
like
we
that.
do installment sales.
Yeah,
And
So-
just-
People don't want it all that capital gain in 1 year. They want
right. They want to
spread
do it
out.
over time.
My question had to do with,
I
Sure.
don't think I've ever seen.
my question had to do with the farmer's choice of whether he or she wanted to
Yeah,
sell
there
their
is a
property
tool.
at, say, 90% of the market value. If they were happy with that number, could they then do that? We're locking it into market value now, and I'm just going to take hypotheticals. If the land is worth $5 million, which is not out of the realm of possibility, and the town offered $4,500,000 because of our own CPF concerns or whatever, could the farmer accept that?
Yes, although I would make the concern that the appraisal sets a fair market value, and that's really what people want to be offered for their property. So,
Fair
you
enough.
know,
Okay.
under market
I'm just saying
valuation
that the
is
language
not
that
really a
Dave
good
read
idea.
Yeah.
Obligates us to offer fair market value.
It does on the
Obligates
one
us,
hand,
not-
but on the other hand, it
Right.
opens
So you could-
Negotiate.
That's the question. It's
You-
clearly-
you could.
the farmer could- I was absolutely
Thank
accept
you.
less.
They have that choice, not,
Yeah, of
I mean,
course.
they
Of
could,
course. And sometimes
Well,
they do.
if we're
because of
obligated
their
to offer
bargain
fair
sale.
market value, why would they
Well,
assess
right,
less?
well, that's the question.
Exactly.
But they
And-
certainly can, but maybe for a bargain sale or estate planning or.
well, I
Well,
wouldn't
that's
want
what
to
I'm
call
saying.
several
There's a
million
whole lot.
dollars a bargain sale. If, for whatever
Well,
reason, you know, their life is where
Qualified.
it is and they
Well,
want,
it's
they're happy with
$500,000
the.
less than, you know. that's
Well, if
fine.
you own the property, you would want to get fair market value. So that's the same consideration, I guess, in
Okay.
the
You know,
end.
I
The
remember-
CPF fund may not be in the position at some
Sure,
point
and that's
in
what the
future
overtime
to
thing is about.
offer that amount, and the farmer may want another amount lower.
I remember-
If that is what they
Well,
want.
I remember at least one occasion since I've been here where one of these lots have come up, and I think we were sort of advised that we had to acquire that lot. We had no choice. Do you remember?
Yeah.
We had to acquire that lot, we appraised it, and we made the offer on fair market value, and we probably did acquire it. I don't remember whose property it was. Was it yours? Maybe not. But it was somebody's property, and we did acquire a lot.
Right, but these aren't fee simple acquisitions, these are development right
It was-
purchases, so that farming then continues, and you're just purchasing the development rights.
Right.
So
Yeah, I
that's a
think there might have
little
been some
different.
confusion as
And
to
that's the
which.
caveat for doing that. That's, that's a requirement. And
where
So the
on
fee simple you're talking about, but we're really not
different.
talking about, we're talking about development
Very
right
different.
acquisitions, more so
Right.
than fee simple purchase of the
Yeah.
land.
Yeah, why do I feel like it was an actual subdivision lot or something, but maybe it was
I do
just a.
remember that.
It
you
could have
remember
been.
Watermill, Bridgehampton area?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a CPF, and I'm not sure, if it was during the enhanced easement thoughts as well.
Yeah.
So if someone's farmland could yield, let's just say 20 development rights, how much are those development rights worth? And then how long is it going to take to purchase them over time, and what's the time period? That's what the ag easement really did. If you don't want it in a PDD realm, which is not an incentive zoning tool, it's a development right purchase acquisition tool. So we can move it to a different section of the code. I think that would work,
Yeah,
and then
and-
work out
and
the kinks with
invent
the
an
ag
entirely new
advisory
acronym
and all
for
of you to see
I
what's
hate
fair
to-
and not
I hate
fair.
to give you more work. And it sounds like, I think, Jim, because you have so much real estate, land use
Yeah,
type
Jim
of
would be
experience, I
perfect
think
help.
you need to be part of
Yeah,
this too.
definitely, love to.
And maybe a guy like John Halsey from
Yeah.
Conic Land Trust,
Yeah.
who's really experienced in terms of all the incentives and, different, tax requirements, estate planning pieces of it. I think he would be good.
And come back in a week.
Do you want to, Tony, John,
Already.
you want to bring forth a resolution establishing a committee to evaluate this and put together?
Yeah, and we have an ag advisory committee meeting next week, and I want to bring it there and have them,
Yeah. So I'll wait for you to
Fine
bring,
on
establish the committee.
okay.
Riverhead has a program too. You might be familiar, and Lee might be familiar with it. Riverhead had a program where it grandfathered the older zoning, or the current zoning. So if somebody had the same concern about the upzonings, so the town agreed that they would, if they were going to buy, if there was an upzoning, that they would buy, they'd preserve the prior zoning as far as yield.
In terms of agricultural
Yeah,
land.
yeah.
Yeah,
I'll have
I
to-
mean,
I'll
they've
take
had
a
a
look
lot
at-
of experience with that. There's
You know,
no-
Yeah, that whole farm belt, they had certain areas in the town where they designated it. And it was
I've been,
in between Main Road and South Road, Sound Avenue.
I've been involved in land acquisition for a long time now. And so have you. I did it at the county, I did it at two towns, and these upzonings, like, when the county would appraise land, they would evaluate it on a per acre price.
Sure.
The
So
yield
subdivision now.
was like irrelevant, whether it was 20 lots or 10 lots. It was, how big was the property? Because zoning was subject to change and things like that. So I'm not even sure that these upzonings have devalued the property.
No, sometimes.
No, but they
sometimes
correlate
kingdom
with
lots
market
are
change.
more valuable than
Right.
smaller lots.
Yeah, one estate lot might be, where you can do your tennis
Depending on where
courts
it
and
is.
pools, may be more valuable than the two
Yeah, that's true.
smaller lots and,
Yeah, depending on
I
where
think
the.
it's not up to those people who sit on boards to
We
struggle with what a family would otherwise have in mind to achieve.
sure.
And so even the ultimate of developing farmland is not in the mind of somebody who right now is coming back to this town
No, absolutely.
for an NPDD.
Yeah.
I think the other aspect of
Charles is about to break through
Yeah,
that
'cause
door
he
and
wants
tell
you
me
to-
that he's
we
not
can't
getting
hear
any of
you.
this on
person
the recorder.
The gentleman who does our
They're
recording,
not recorded.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, I'm so sorry.
he's very good at what he does.
No, it's okay, and I want to make sure that anybody watching is able to hear what you have to
I
say,
understand.
Lisa.
I understand. To the point of purchasing development rights over time, I think it is fair for me to say that in the past 5 or 6 years, the town really and truly wasn't interested in doing that. They wanted it all. And that's when the Topping Farm came to you.
What do you wanted it all, we wanted to buy the fee?
No, sorry, not the fee.
Want it all one
but
shot.
one shot.
Oh,
In other
one
words,
shot.
don't bother us with blah, 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 blah. And in our case, it was fine. But the whole aspect of the Ag PDD really does work as far as pulling off a piece. And the town has been very receptive to that in the past. It's worked.
I have no doubt.
Yeah.
My concern, again, as I state, is just, it has this connotation by the public, the word.
No, I
PDD.
realize. I
So
mean, it makes it,
But the underlying, the roots of this
Right.
code, I think, is, it's doing what it's supposed to do.
It
We have
absolutely-
not heard, this is the first time we've heard about a PDD.
In 20 years.
Ag PDD, in a long time.
yeah, no, because I think when it was first, the inception of this, with the difficulties within even the category of the people that came together was, oh my God, what's going to happen when there's a new town board?
Right.
It's going to be very, very difficult for you all to understand it, but a review, I think.
Before you sit down, and I do like this idea of a review, and I hope that you'll be part of that review. Let me just think out loud for a second. So if you came to us, not you directly, but a farmer comes to us and has, let's say, 20 development rights and wants to sell us just one. Yeah, we probably wouldn't be that interested.
You're
because
correct, and that's where the negotiation comes in.
And the reason I think why we wouldn't be that interested in, because the 19 homes that will go there, that are left, is going to diminish the value of that farming. It's going to be a small lot, it'll be less farmable, because it might be removed from other large tracts of farm. So I think we are predisposed to want to basically get all of the development rights, or most of the development rights. One house maybe wouldn't be so bad, but 19 houses would be. So I think that if
Right,
we,
you're talking as a good planner, and I
So-
think that that's relevant.
Death by 1,000
so,
cuts.
but
I
if
don't
we
wanna
had
do
a
that.
tool that sort of encumbered the development rights, so that said,
Jay,
okay,
it won't flow. I'll just tell you right there, if you're talking about an ag PDD, that's an idea that is not going to flow.
So let me just explain. So basically, let's say the farmer has 20 rights, and we're agreeing to buy all 20, but we want to do it over a longer period of time.
Well, we did that too.
So something that would
I
sort
mean,
of
but it
protect-
was a negotiation by virtue of what we were willing to sell at the time. And then that number
Right.
moved along so that capital gains
Right, so the
wasn't it?
farmer might say, look, I don't want to sell you all the rights this minute for tax purposes, but I'm willing to sell those 20 rights over 20 years.
Correct.
So we set up some kind of mechanism that allows for that incremental sale, where we lock in
It's already there. It's already been used. That's what I'm saying, that's what I'm trying to
That's-
tell you.
what's,
That it-
That's
that
in this
the-
PDD.
It's in this ag PDD.
This
Ah.
PDD.
no, there's a different
A
tool.
different one?
Okay, so that was an outright, okay, got it. All right, so that's part of what's going to
Well,
be,
the add-on that Dave Wilcox was talking about, I think, covers that.
yeah.
If I misunderstood, then,
This ag
but I'm waiting to hear what
PDD
this committee comes on.
This ag PDD doesn't do that. It only seems to obligate the town to potentially buy one development right in that 10-year period. This idea of some sort of installment sale
The installments.
over an extended period of time, I think we've only experienced installment sales over maybe a 2-year period in the
Yeah,
past.
that's all I've seen.
Though I'm not sure.
Right, I forget about, okay, that's the thing about me standing here is it confuses me. But let's just
But
say
no,
that
you may be right.
in light of the review process and the various people that are going to be back at the table, you'll straighten that out.
We will.
But I'm not sure you're wrong.
And Lisa's now come into the room, too, Lisa Combrink, for our CPF program manager, and she actually has a lot of experience, too,
Uh-oh,
with.
you shouldn't have come in, Lisa.
And, I think
you.
Lisa obviously has to be part of any committee, Tommy John, that gets put together, too. So, all right, this has been a really interesting discussion, and I think the board does want to do our part to keep farming alive in our community. So, and we appreciate you coming here, Lee. And I don't personally think the old PDD, ag PDD, is the right tool. I think we can come up with something better that is protective of the farmers and protective of the town's interests. So I look forward to what comes of this. I know we're all incredibly busy, so it's hard for me to ask people to devote even more of their time, but it's a worthy pursuit. So Tommy John, I look forward to you putting a resolution forward to create a working group.
Okay.
Okay? Anybody else on that? Okay, let's move then to some updates Let's see what I have. Thank you, Lee, for coming. How are things in Sagaponack?
I don't know, what are your interests?
How's things in Sagaponack are good? In the village? All right. So first thing I'll mention, Tommy John and I both were able to go to sort of it was a ribbon cutting for certain for the Sag Harbor Cinema, but it was very, because of COVID, not heavily publicized event. But Tommy John and I were able to tour the Sag Harbor Cinema. As you know, the CPF fund came in a very large way with a grant as we purchased the commercial rights over that property. It's really a gem. I mean, it's just an absolutely gorgeous facility, and it's going to be, when the pandemic is over, it's going to be a real treat to anybody who goes there and watches a movie. It's very comfortable. The audio and visual are superb, and it's going to feature a lot of cultural and artistic films. So it's going to be a great part of our community. And Tommy John offered some excellent words at the ribbon cutting. I'll let him speak for himself, but he has a sort of a lifetime experience with this cinema, much more than I do, though I've been there at times in the past, but it hasn't been as much a part of my life as it has to those residents of that area. But certainly iconic in terms of the sign and the street frontage. So, Tommy John, do you want to add to that? Assemblyman Thiel, I should say Assemblyman Thiel also spoke at this.
I can't tell you what it was like to see the facade come down. It was pulled down because it was unsafe after the fire in December of 2016, and I mean that was tough. That was tough. And the sign came down. The sign was almost trashed on the spot. People, residents in the community, literally saved the sign. And volunteers reworked the sign. It was stored. Money was raised in the community. We had several small donors, many small donors, and some big donors, in addition to New York State and, of course, the town of Southampton. So thank you for that. And I have to tell you, seeing the facade go back up and driving down Main Street in Sag Harbor, and you see people literally every day taking selfies with the sign behind them. It's kind of an event, and they have to stay out of traffic, but they'll do that right in the crosswalk. And so that facade is now back up in the middle of Sag Harbor, in the middle of that federal historic district, and it really is. Our community is back together, and I think for the better. It's a magnificent facility. They didn't spare. Well, I shouldn't say that. But I know they really sharpened the pencil on the numbers that they were using and the expenses in recreating the theater. They took pieces literally from the ashes, refurbished them. All the ends of the seats are the original ends, the cast iron ends of the seats, and they have the lights back in them, and the light fixtures are back up. So they saved some of the Art Deco motif that was part of the old cinema. The old cinema where we watched Night of the Living Dead.
Nice.
But, so it really is back. And I want to thank the board, and thank the board at that ribbon cutting, too, for your support for that effort.
Yeah, and that group that put this all together, we're so thankful to all of you for supporting it. So thankful. Mentioned a number of times for us, Tommy John and I, to tell you guys how grateful they were for the town's support and how critical that support came at exactly the right moment and made it possible. And although we're just a fraction of the overall costs, we gave a $4 million grant. It's not too shabby there. That's a lot of money, but this was a much larger project, at least 5 times that magnitude, if not more, to make this happen between acquiring and rebuilding. So. I give a lot of credit to everybody who was on that board, and And particularly, I recognized that when I spoke, April Gornick, who sort of led the effort to make this happen. It's a daunting task, raising that kind of money. And the fact that they were able to do it is a lot of credit to those individuals and to the Sag Harbor community that really rallied, not only just supporting it with their voices, but with their dollars. A lot of people donated. You'll see inside, they have a wall with all the various donations. It's a massive wall because so many people contributed. So that's a really positive thing. Another thing I'll mention is the online housing survey. It just ended yesterday. Good responses, 2,500 people completed the survey. That's a much higher, a higher number of people than particularly would participate in a reliable poll. You see these, polls with 400 responses, and they're statistically accurate within a few percentage points. 2,500 people, that's pretty good turnout. The consultants are VHB, and they'll be helping us update the comprehensive housing plan. And I know that they've been going to various CACs. Julie, you've been involved with some of that, right?
Yeah, they had all the Zoom meetings.
Yeah. We had a good
Yeah,
turnout for
lots of them.
CAC West,
It's
and
good.
I thought it was well-run and well-presented.
And I
And
guess
it was interesting that the response from, at least in our community, and in the CAC West community, in the west end of the town, is it leaned towards economic opportunities and merging that with housing. And it was a very different response than I was expecting. It was actually they came out with a lot of good ideas and an understanding of what the survey was meant to do. So I thought it was well done.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and there will be a public hearing in front of us at some point on these changes to our comprehensive housing plan. So probably early next year.
I'm assuming VRB is going to have put all the data together and
VHB.
Yeah.
VHB.
So I'm waiting to see what that data actually, you get it in different segments, but you talk to other CAC members, and then you hear differences in the way it was. So it'll be really interesting to see what that data presents.
I do think the community there is a consensus building that we need more housing for our workforce. It's the hardest part is figuring out where it's going and what it's going to look like and at what density. So I think, I know, Julie, you've been an advocate of this kind of localized planning effort where the community themselves could come up with sort of the recommended set of tools, I guess, whatever you want to call it, ideas for that hamlet. So hopefully this is, going to be productive.
Well, and that's kind of what these sessions were. It was, and anybody was invited, but I would say the majority were people from the hamlet that specific meeting was for. And they had a say in it, and hopefully that they did fill out the greater survey, and we can continue to ask their input, because they're the ones that are living there. They should have a say in what they want in their community.
And it was a good way to educate them on this process and others who saw it subsequent. I was on all of the meetings, and it was great for Diana Weir to explain why we need to update the comprehensive plan and our code as well.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of code addressing affordable housing, and that is going to be part of this as well, to straighten out our code and various aspects of this code as well. That should be part of this effort.
Now, it's interesting with COVID, the prices have gone up, making it even harder now for people to buy. That's, and also our population, and I know you'll probably say something about the census, but our population's gone up too, and when the population goes up, more people demand services. They're living in the houses longer, things break down, they need to repair them, they need somebody to, they're going out to the restaurants, whatever it is, going to the barber shop. So there's a greater demand for labor, and, so it's basically more labor demand and less housing at the same time. So COVID has actually exacerbated or made worse the problem. There's also interesting, it seems like less people are using the buses now. I think there's probably more than one reason, but for COVID is certainly a factor, so that we have more traffic on the road. So if we're thinking that our workforce is just going to live outside of our area and commute in, guess again. So that's because they're not going to use the trains. Our morning trains aren't running right now. The buses are getting cut back. So I think you're going to see more people go back to vehicles, which will make our roads, even worse. It's going to be really hard to expect our workforce to commute in. They can't
But
get in.
it is interesting to note that I know that Diana had put together some statistical data. I think you all saw that she had presented about, looking at Tuckahoe and looking
Who's
at
living here,
Gatsby on Commons. And it was quite, it would be as you expected, but there is also a portion of people that want to make this their year-round community. That's what they want to do, and they need to have a place to work and more importantly, a place to stay. But I thought the correlation was kind of interesting between how many people actually, within that sort of what we call the magic circle there, 50-mile
50-mile radius, yeah.
It's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
But with this influx of people now, if you look at it as a temporary situation, most people are working from home in that regard. But what happens when that declines again? You build to what you need, and then there's going to be some kind of decline in that as well. So we still need to be able to, have these developments work in a way that, plans for the future. So, getting to Councilman Ciavoni's point, the comprehensive plan, and I've gotten a lot of calls that, why are you doing this housing survey? And that's one of the primary reasons and I think, we've talked about this before, that we're at a point where we're going to need to review the comprehensive plan. It hasn't been changed in a long time, and this may be something to, kick off that work.
Let me just hit on a couple other quick topics. I'm expecting the county budget to come out, Suffolk County budget to come out this week. I am concerned, as I've said, that the county county executive is going to propose reductions in sales tax that he provides to the town, a significant 50% reduction is what I understand. We currently get close to $3 million in sales tax money. That may drop to $1.5 million. So we lose $1.5 million. That's going to be really challenging. I know it all is sort of resting on whether the federal government passes a stimulus package that has aid to municipalities, and that would potentially help us, but also would help the county. The county executive is assuring me that he will make us whole, restore the cuts. I'm concerned that won't pass. So I have discussed this with the two East End legislators. My concern about having such a drastic cut in a budget. County sales tax between January and today have fallen by about close to 10%, 9.5%. I'd be more comfortable if the budget cut us by 10% rather than 50%. It still would be a $300,000 cut. It would be significant, but it would be in line with the county's losses in sales tax. Sort of would make sense. Also, the county executive has proposed $20 million cut to Suffolk County PD, but that only amounts to like a 3 or 4% cut, not a 50% cut. So, I'm hoping as the legislature wrestles with the county budget that there may be some changes that are made. We have very able advocates in Bridget Fleming and Al Krupski. But we'll wait and see. You guys have my budget. I don't know really what to tell you, how to deal with this cut. or potential cut. A, it doesn't exist yet because the
Right.
budget's not out. If it does exist, I don't know what the county legislature is going to do. So it might not ultimately exist. So we do have reserves in the police budget that could absorb it if there's no federal package, but it would get us through the year, but it would be, you know, I hate to have to apply those reserves. They are there for a rainy day, but I'd like to have them there for the future too. So those are going to be, we're going to have to wrestle with that. Another thing going on at the county level, well, I mentioned public transportation, and there are cuts to the public bus transport. Not the S92 does not appear to be proposed for being cut. That is our main bus route. But there are other routes that go off the S92, so our residents who use the S92 may not be able to get to work anymore because, let's say they work out in Montauk, it's dead-ended now in East Hampton. Doesn't go to Montauk because the 10C, which goes out to Montauk, has been taken away. If they work in Waynescott, there's no way to get to Waynescott because the bus turns at Bridgehampton, the S92 goes to Sag Harbor, and then down to East Hampton. So there are problems with these cuts. There are a lot of cuts in western Suffolk too. So depending upon where our workforce is coming from or where people are going, there are a lot of people who are dependent on public transportation. Dependent. They can't drive, maybe because of an impairment, a disability, or otherwise. This is definitely going to be a problem, these bus cuts. There are other cuts, too, that are being proposed. Lastly, the county has been doing groundwater testing at Beaumark. It's a county facility on, was that Old Country Road?
Old Country Road, it's where the sheriff's, near where the sheriff's.
In West Hampton, there's a shooting range over there. There's a sheriff's office, the county impound area. It was a federal property. They had, I guess, Nike missiles there once upon a
Yep,
time.
that's where they were hidden in the pines there, way in the back.
Yeah. Anyway, it became county property. The county's been doing groundwater studies. They have published that. I think it still is up, their report on the county website. There were some detections of perfluorinated compounds, PFOA or PFOS. There are some private well users in that area. They have been testing those wells. Anyone who is above a certain standard, I think 70 parts per trillion, have been
Well,
given,
this
hold on a
is-
second, have been given POET systems. So the DEC has put in these point of entry treatment systems, and anyone above
This
10.
week's edition of New York Now, lawmakers will
Hi.
begin this week with Governor
It's locked, Tommy John. Can you just mute it or turn the volume down?
what happened this week and what's ahead.
Okay, anyone who's, anyone, I believe, who's above 10 parts per million is getting water delivered. And I don't know what they're doing with detections below that level. I think that I don't know if they're providing water or whether I'm not sure what they're doing, but it is something that we're following closely. I know that there's an effort to try to get public water to all the property owners in that area, particularly those that have impacted wells. But,
Well,
Frank,
there's also the governor has come out with a set of proposed New York standards on I-4 dioxane, but also including PFAS, is bringing it down to the 10 parts per trillion level. It's a proposal.
so the state has adopted the 10 parts per trillion now.
So we're at this point now.
Yeah.
That there is still some issue. I think there may be a challenge to that, because the EPA is still at a different level than the state has, so there's a potential to challenge. That's why I just bring that up. But yes, you're correct. Right now, that's what the state is saying.
Right.
And that's what we have to operate on.
If people live in that area and they have concerns, they certainly can call me. They should also, though, call Suffolk County Health Department. That's really where their calls ought to go. They're the ones managing this. They're involved with the groundwater study, and if they have any questions about getting their water tested, they can get their well tested if they're on a private well, and it's very important that people take this seriously, that, these chemicals, typically associated with fire suppression foam, could be from something else. They are very toxic, and they should not be ingested. So it's important, if you live in those areas, to heed these warnings and take measures to provide an alternative source of drinking water. All right. Let's see. Lastly, I'll just jump to census, and I guess they finished. Did we hit the deadline now, Tommy John?
We did. Yesterday was the deadline, September 30th, but a federal appeals court has extended it. So now the deadline is at the end of October, but however, the presidential administration has indicated that it will end on October 5th. So there's a
few more days.
There's some confusion there. Yeah, go figure. And
Confusion in Washington?
I know. It's
Who would have thought?
currently the census is still open. You mentioned two legislators that we have, capable people, Legislator Krupski and Legislator Fleming. I just think it's worthy to note that those two representatives represent Southold, Riverhead, large parts of Brookhaven. This is Krupski's district, and Legislator Fleming represents East Hampton, Southampton, Shelter Island, and parts of Brookhaven. Those are two legislators out of 18 legislators. So we have 2 in the 5 East End towns and Brookhaven, parts of Brookhaven, and 16 legislators to the west. So, these do have budgetary consequences, and, I know they're going to go to bat for us in the way that they can, but it's important to fill out the census for the drawing of districts and money.
I would say it's more than important. I would say it's critical. If you think about how this disparity is in representation, and the only way that gets cured is through census and filling out the census. And you're right, there's 2 legislators who have been, and you were one, and you know this, you sort of stand against a very different attitude west of us, and it's really hard to do that, and we don't have enough representation, and they fight the good fight, but, we're coming up against critical issues here that we need to fix, so.
Once upon a time, the county was run by a board of supervisors, and the 10 supervisors, of which 5 were from the East End, the 5 East End towns. We had equal representation to Western Suffolk. Today, 2 out of 18, or like 10%, not 50%.
Yeah, that changed in 1959, the switch over to the districts by population.
Yeah.
And for good reason. That was a 14th Amendment issue. 2,000
was
people
much
in
later.
Shelter Island.
It worked out well for us. It worked out well for us.
Nassau was in the 80s, I think it changed, early 80s.
Wow.
The Board of Supervisors.
They had 2 options at the time to go to this districting of, each district roughly have like 90,000 people per district, or to do a weighted board of supervisors, where you'd have the 10 supervisors, but a supervisor of a town like Brookhaven would have a larger vote. And they opted for the legislative approach.
Sort of like the delegate count.
Yeah.
By the way, most counties in the state still have boards of supervisors. The town supervisors represent their town at the county level.
Yeah.
Of course, they're much smaller. The towns are much smaller. than
Sure.
counties.
All right, so you guys, I know you guys have some updates too, so I know, Rick, do you want to start with East End cleanup stuff?
Yeah, finally, it's here this weekend, the Great East End Cleanup. We will, this 3rd and the 4th, from 9 a.m., full days, anything you need. Go on our website, southamptontowny.gov, to sign up. You'll get your plastic bags and your passes for the transfer stations. We're getting a huge turnout for it. There's 4 or 5 other local cleanups going on, so we should be spiffy clean by Monday.
Nice.
Good.
So looking forward to it.
Good.
And the weather should
And the weather's gonna be
cooperate.
great
It'll be
fall
perfect.
days.
Yeah.
You got anything else for us?
Good for now.
All right, who else? Anybody?
I got
Comment? Go ahead, Julie.
So I took a drive past Foster Avenue Park yesterday, and the equipment's going up. I know that Kristen was here last week and gave you some information on that. It's looking very good. We're planning a small ribbon cutting ceremony for next week. We're going to physically distance, not socially distance, because we want to be social, but we don't want to be physically close. So you guys will be getting your invitations. There's some other, a couple people that we're inviting. I wanted to thank the Parks Department for moving so quickly on this. But I also want to recognize the Hampton Bays High School senior class.
This is, I'm sorry, this
Yeah.
is the playground, so.
The playground that burnt, yes, I'm sorry, the playground that burnt down in the beginning of COVID, which was just another hit on the community. So because of COVID, the Hampton Bays High School class of 2020 didn't get their prom and a bunch of other events, and they actually donated a very large amount of money for another piece of equipment at the park. So they are going to be represented as well at our ribbon cutting, hopefully, if they can get there.
Very cool.
One of them, yeah.
That's great.
So I just wanted to thank them for their very, very gracious contribution and very unselfish. So
great.
look out for your invitations, and hopefully you can make it.
When is this, what's the
Next Friday.
Next Friday.
The 9th at 10 a.m.
Okay, great.
I hope we can get a small plaque or something to dedicate to the class of 2020.
That's a good idea.
Or at a minimum.
I believe that Kristen Doulos is, because that one piece of equipment isn't going to make it for the ribbon cutting, she's going to have a sign made. So there will be something there for them.
Oh, good.
Yeah. That's it.
Tommy John, you had something, right?
I do. Last week, we had a meeting, a LoSAP meeting. This is the Lengths of Service Award Program for our ambulance districts, and we had representation from 18 different ambulance corporations at the meeting. It was a good showing, talking about New York state law, so I appreciate the volunteers who spent the night learning about LoSAP. And we have another one on Thursday night for our fire district, and it's open to all fire districts who want to learn more about LoSAP. And of course, this was predicated to the change in Town Law 219 on the state level, so that we're offering this to our fire districts so that they can be up on everything, and that will start at 7 o'clock. If anybody has a question, please email my office. We'll give you we sent the links out anyway, but if somebody sees this in time. Also, our SHAC committee, the Southampton Arts and Cultural Committee, we're looking to do virtual on-the-road tours. So, and we're thinking of the Sag Harbor Cinema having a Zoom event with an online guided tour from the Southampton Arts and Cultural Committee as well. So that's fun, and that'll be happening in October. And that's all for now.
I was going to go look up our numbers real quick, but I check our numbers every day for COVID in the town of Southampton. I look at all the numbers through every town in Suffolk County. Our numbers are good. I mean, I'd like to see 0 cases on the throughout Suffolk County, but on the East End, a typical day is 1 case. There's 1 case. I'm waiting for an extended period of 0 cases. That'll be a big game changer, particularly if we go 2 weeks with no cases, because of the incubation period. But I have been tracking Western Suffolk versus Eastern Suffolk, and we're 1/10 of the population of the county, the East End. So if there are 100 cases in Suffolk County, I expect to see 10 of them in the East End town. That is not what I'm seeing. I'm seeing for every 100 cases in the county, about 5 or less on the East End. So we're about half the rate. And this has been a phenomenon really since Labor Day. So before that, we tracked pretty much that 10%. Now we're tracking much lower. So the growth of COVID in Suffolk County is predominantly to the west of us. That doesn't mean it will stay this way. I hope it does. But right now, our numbers are pretty good. I did speak on Monday with Southampton Hospital, and they have fluctuated. Sometimes they're up to 4 patients, sometimes 1 patient, sometimes 0 patients. I think the last time I spoke, there was 1 patient on Monday. So same with Peconic Bay Hospital. We obviously want that to be 0. So, as long as people keep doing what they're doing, I think we'll keep the numbers down. Although we're staying popular, there still is, are people coming and going, maybe not as much as there were in July and August. I think some people have gone back, and maybe as the weather cools, there'll be less. I know right now farming events are pretty popular, like Pumpkin Town and things like that, and that is drawing people into our area. But I'll try to, either I'll do it or maybe Ryan, when he gets a chance, to come and update you on where we stand. But we still are in a state of emergency. I don't know if it's 7 months or 8 months. I'm continuing to sign extensions, things like the way Town Hall operates, because there's limited access here. If you look at this room, you'll see the chairs are taped up. There's certain things that we're doing that are COVID related that are still part of this, state of emergency. So the state is obviously still under a state of emergency as well. We still have some of the parking regulations in effect. They're going, maybe they have expired now. There's really, we're getting to a point where they're no longer needed. The beaches aren't going to be as popular as they were. So I have to check whether they're still in effect now. But some of the other things are, the main emergency order is still in effect. I think the emergency order for restaurants and things like that allows outdoor dining, I continue to sign every 5 days. I think actually I'm done with the parking restrictions. I think that's over. Maybe at the end of, maybe September 30th was the last day for those.
Jay, if I could
That's it.
interject here,
Yeah.
I really think that we should give a shout out to our constituents. I mean, really, the social norms have changed. I know when I go to stores and on the street, people are staying distant. When you're walking through doorways, we get it here. We know that masks work, and it's good to hear that our numbers are staying steady and low.
Absolutely. This is a partnership. This is a partnership between state government, local government, and all of the people in our community who are everybody doing their part.
That's what makes it work.
Our numbers wouldn't be where they are if people weren't taking this seriously. I just, one more thing about the emergency order. So obviously the senior centers remain closed. I'm looking forward to opening them, but we're not ready yet. So we're just going to continue to deliver meals. That's part of the broader executive order. I believe I issued that executive order through the end of October, because I didn't see anything changing by the end of October in terms of the restrictions on town hall and other town facilities, including our senior centers. So I can always lift it if suddenly, the pandemic has
Well, we're going to see
Has left.
a shift in weather and driving people inside and those things associated with that. So, I agree with Councilman that it is a partnership and people recognize the importance of continuing to wear masks and be safe. But there's also this transition, which a lot of the public health officials are warning against, that, as we go indoors, we need to be even more vigilant as we start to do that. So,
Yep.
I just want to echo that. I know the governor had come out with an identification of 20 zip codes. There's spikes in New York, particularly in Kings County and in some of those areas in
no
New
zip
York.
codes on the east end. Which is,
Yeah, well, there are. There are 2 in Suffolk.
in Suffolk, yeah, but not in the 5 east end towns.
Not in this,
Yeah.
in the western part.
In the
So
117.
We're doing something here, and we need to keep doing that. Yeah, can't just assume everything is good. This is the time to be
Yeah.
even more aware. I just had one thing, just another shout out to the American Legion. I attended their 100th year anniversary of the American Legion Post in West Hampton, and it was an inside event.
Really?
Yeah, which kind of surprised me, but I think things went well. I'm counting. I think we'll see how it goes, but congratulations. And we have a veteran who's celebrating his 96th birthday.
Huh.
So, anyway.
That's great, that's
It
great.
was, it was a really nice event.
World War II vet?
World War II. And his brother as well, who's also a World War II vet, who's also still alive, and apparently, although their exchanges aren't as animated as they used to be, they still talk about the,
No, my dad served in World War II.
yeah, so did my father did, as well,
And-
my grandfather.
If he were alive, he'd be around 96 today,
Yeah.
too, so maybe a little bit older, maybe 98, but,
It's a fantastic generation.
yeah.
Be great.
Incredible, yeah. Then he did it again in Korea.
Did
He was active in both wars, yeah.
No, my father got
Active
run
duty.
over by a tank. He pretty much gave up his military career at that point, in training.
Yeah. It's we're unfortunately, losing a lot of those World War II vets.
Yeah.
We're getting to that point. So we have to really honor those individuals and let them know how grateful we are for their service. Boy, life would be so different if World War II went a different way. All right. That's, I think, all for updates. So I think just executive session, we're going to talk about possible land acquisitions and get some confidential legal advice. So I'll make a motion. Well, is there anybody have anything else before that? Okay, so let me make a motion to end our work session and go to executive session for those reasons.
Second.
Seconded by Councilman Lofstad. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you.